Two men retired from the same factory the same year. Same job, same shifts, nearly 40 years each on the floor. Both started their CPP the month they turned 65. One of them gets a check every month that's almost $300 bigger than the other. Same work, same pay, same plan. So where did that $300 go? I'm going to tell you exactly where it went, because it's not luck and it's not some loophole only rich people know about. The man with the smaller check made one mistake, and it's the most common mistake in the entire Canada pension plan. He trusted that the numbers were right. He assumed that after a lifetime of working and paying in, the record of what he earned was correct, because why wouldn't it be? And that assumption is quietly costing Canadians money every single month for the rest of their lives. The other man did one thing differently. It was free, it took him an afternoon, and it's something you can do this week. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to know precisely what he checked, what he found, and the exact steps to do the same thing yourself. And there's one part near the end that almost nobody knows about that can be worth more than all the rest combined. Before we get into it, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. I'll be honest with you about why. The rules around CPP shift constantly. The ceilings, the provisions, the claiming ages, and when they change, nobody from the government phones you to explain what it means for your money. They change the policy and assume you'll figure it out. What I do here is take those changes apart in plain language so you hear about them before a deadline passes, not after. The people subscribed stay ahead of this stuff. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. So let's go back to those two men. The difference between their checks has nothing to do with how hard either one worked. It comes down to a single number that runs underneath your entire pension, and almost no one knows it's there. Here's the thing most people get wrong about CPP. They think the check is based on what they made in their final few years, or some flat government rate everybody gets. It's neither. Your CPP is calculated on your average earnings stretched across your whole working life, from the year you turned 18 all the way to the year you start collecting. Every year you worked gets measured, adjusted for how wages have grown over the decades, and folded into one lifetime average. That average is the engine. It decides the size of every check you'll ever receive. And here is what that means. If even 1 year in that long history is recorded wrong, too low, or worse, recorded as a zero when you were actually working, it drags the whole average down. Not for 1 year, forever. That's what happened to the man with the smaller check. Somewhere back in the early 90s, an employer reported his earnings wrong. 1 year, one bad number, submitted by hand by a payroll clerk who's long gone. He never knew. He just collected the smaller check for the rest of his life and assumed that was simply what he'd earned. Now you might be thinking, surely the government catches that. They don't. There is no review, no alert, no letter that says, we think your record might be off. The earnings data goes in from your employers, the pension comes out, and the only person on earth who can catch a mistake in it is you. And the only way you can catch it is by looking at one specific free document. It's called your CPP Statement of Contributions. You get it inside a free account called My Service Canada account at canada.ca. Setting it up the first time takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Once you're in, you go to the Canada Pension Plan section and choose View My Contributions. And there it is, a list of every year you've worked and what was reported for it, going back to your very first job. Most Canadians have never laid eyes on it. The man with the bigger check had. He sat down with his old tax slips one weekend, went year by year, and found a year in the 90s recorded at a fraction of what he'd actually earned. He filed to fix it. His average climbed. His check went up permanently. Now, before you panic, that one bad year automatically wrecks your pension, there's something working in your favor, and you need to understand it because it tells you what's actually worth chasing. CPP has a built-in safety net called the general dropout. It automatically tosses out roughly your worst 17% of months, up to about 8 years of your lowest earnings, so a couple of lean or empty years won't hurt you. But the net only stretches so far. Once you've used up that cushion, every extra bad year past it lands directly on your average. So a wrong number in one of your strong earning years, or a real working year sitting there as a zero, can still quietly shrink your check, even with the dropout doing its job. That's why you look closely at your best years first. An error there does the most damage. So who's most likely to have a mistake hiding in their record? Anyone who worked for small businesses in the 80s and 90s, when payroll was done by hand and wrong numbers were common. Anyone self employed at some point, because those earnings sometimes never land on the record correctly. Anyone who switched jobs a lot, every job change was a fresh chance for a bad report. And especially women who changed their last name after a marriage or divorce. Because if the name on an employer's report doesn't match the name on your file, those earnings can fail to attach to you at all. Sitting in the system, credited to nobody. And now the part I promised you, the one that can be worth more than everything else combined. If you ever stayed home to raise young children, listen closely. There's a provision called the child rearing dropout. Any stretch where you had a child under 7 and your earnings fell because you were caring for them, that whole period can be lifted out of your calculation on top of the regular dropout. For a parent who took years away from work, this can swing the average dramatically and add real money to every check. But here's the trap. It is not always applied for you automatically. You usually have to ask for it when you apply. So if you raised little ones and nobody ever brought this up, there's a genuine chance you are being underpaid right now, today, and the only way to know is to look. So here's exactly what to do. The same thing the man with the bigger check did. Go to Canada.ca and set up your My Service Canada account if you don't have one. Open your statement of contributions and find your earnings year by year. Pull out whatever records you've kept, old tax slips, pay stubs, returns, and compare. You're hunting for 3 things. A year lower than what you actually made, a year showing 0 when you know you were working, and a year missing altogether. Go slow and start with your best earning years, because that's where a mistake costs you the most. Find something off? You can request a correction through Service Canada, backed by your documentation. Your T4 slips are the gold standard for employed years. Recent years have a tighter window, so don't drag your feet, but older errors going back decades can still be fixed if you've got proof, so never assume it's too late. If you're not sure where to begin, call Service Canada at 1-800-277-9914 and they'll walk you through it or mail you a copy of your statement. And one note, if you've only ever lived and worked in Quebec, your plan is the Quebec Pension Plan instead, and you'd check your record through Retrate Quebec. Same idea, different door. So those 2 men, same factory, same 40 years. The only real difference between their checks was that one of them looked and one of them trusted. Don't be the one who trusts. Your whole pension rests on decades of numbers reported by other people, and if any of them are wrong, or if a provision you qualified for was never switched on, your check is smaller than it should be, and it stays that way until you catch it. The document that lets you catch it is free, and it's about 10 minutes away. Go to Canada.ca, open your statement of contributions, check it year by year, and if something's off, or if you raised young children and the child rearing provision was never applied, file to fix it. That's it. That's the whole difference between the 2 checks. Subscribe and send this to someone you know who's on CPP or getting close, because one weekend afternoon could be worth thousands to them over the years ahead. I'll see you in the next one.